The Construction Association of Michigan, CAM, has been helping commercial and industrial contractors and suppliers grow since 1885. Now's the time to join. Visit buildwithcam.com. If you're a construction company looking to grow, CAM offers resources to help you build your staff, find more projects, and expand your network. Join today. The Construction Association of Michigan. They're one industry, one resource, one CAM. Join today at buildwithcam.com.
Today's episode of CAM's Building Michigan podcast is sponsored by Priority Health, endorsed health insurance carrier for CAM members.
So right now, we've all been feeling lots of shifts in our lives. We've gone from crazy busy schedules to way more time with our loved ones, from commuting to the office to working from our couches. And that's okay, because Priority Health is always ready to shift right there with you. So whether you're experiencing a shift in employment or you're prepping for a new member of the family to arrive, Priority Health has you covered. Priorities shift, so maybe it's time your health insurance company did too. Find your plan at PriorityHealth.com.
It's that time of year. Time to review your workers' compensation plan and shift to coverage that pays you back. CAMCOMP, part of the Construction Association of Michigan, is the state's leading self-insured group designed for the construction industry. The safer your employees, the more money you get back. The average payback to members is 45% of their premium, a very smart investment.
Find out how safety pays. For more information, please contact Michelle Mage at mmage@camcomp.net.
Hello and welcome to our 16th episode of Building Michigan podcast, produced for Michigan's construction industry by the Construction Association of Michigan, CAM. My name is Kevin Koehler. I'm the president of CAM and your host for Building Michigan. Our podcast is designed for Michigan's construction industry. Each 25 to 30-minute episode will feature conversations on industry topics, including a variety of conversations with industry leaders, discussing construction projects, trends, business development, safety, legislation, and other industry-related topics. All right, let's get started. This is Season 2, Episode 16. Today's episode features a conversation with Adam Cosola and Jason Epstein, co-owners of CTC Talent Partners, a recruiting and consulting firm based in Metro Detroit, specifically helping construction companies fill salaried positions from manager through C-suite. They have owned their company for over 7+ years and have 20 years of experience recruiting in the construction industry. The company's mantra is helping companies attract, hire, and retain the right employees. Which leads us to the theme of today's podcast. How do our employers, members of the Construction Association of Michigan, win the war for talent? Adam, Jason, welcome to CAM's Building Michigan podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks,
Great to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to jump right into this. So, Adam, let's start with you. Please tell us a little bit about your background and about CTC, what the company is, what you guys do, and what you specialize in.
Yeah, Kevin, actually, Jason, sitting next to me, actually got me into the recruiting industry. So that about 9 years ago. And we started CTC about 7 years ago, actually a little over 7 years ago. And, throughout the whole process, we've been helping construction companies with attracting, selecting, and retaining the best people.
Which is hugely important today because we're all in a talent crisis, right? So all of our member firms are looking to attract and keep and retain great talent. So it's super fitting. Jason, let me go to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what CTC stands for.
Well, that doesn't stand for anything. So
okay.
It originally stand for Client Talent Consulting Solutions.
Oh, all right.
We just went to CTC Talent Partners. So maybe
so you just kind of kept the acronym.
Yeah, we just got the acronym.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell us about yourself, Jason.
Yeah, so born and raised here in Michigan. Actually grew up in a third-generation construction family. Have a legal background. Spent the first few years of my professional life practicing law. Quickly realized that wasn't the right path for me. I had always been contacted by recruiters, the proverbial square peg and round hole conversation. Just really saw a disconnect between how companies kind of explain opportunities, how they look at positions, how they set people up for long-term career pathing and success. saw a gap in the industry and saw something that I personally enjoyed, connecting people with opportunity. I've been working in the industry for about 11 years, primarily in the construction space. Started on the agency side, went in-house with a large commercial concrete company where we got exposure to organizational development and organizational design. Ab and I started CTC in May of 2016 with an emphasis really on helping companies tell a better story, helping them clearly identify their kind of value proposition and attraction strategy to the market, and helping them better identify who their actual candidate pool of potential hires is.
Interesting. Before we jump into the whole program today, it's great to know that you have your third generation, constructor, I guess, and the fact that you actually have some construction background as well. I mean, you were working for a construction company, so who better to help with recruiting than somebody who knows what they're trying to recruit, right?
Spent plenty of summers sweeping basements. Yep.
Yeah, there you
started
go.
In the trenches.
That's how most of them start.
That's right.
So, guys, let's just jump into the program. We've got a lot of topics to cover today. I'm excited to get to them. Knowing the candidate pool, making sure we know who we're hiring and who we're going after, attracting the right candidate. How do we do that? The interview process, and then finally the offer stage. And I think we're going to talk briefly about each of those aspects of hiring. And I think, Jason, we'll start with you if that's okay. When a company is looking at hiring for a position or multiple positions, what is it that makes them successful? What does a successful company, a successful contractor have to do to get the right candidates in the room?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the first thing they have to do is have a true understanding of who is comprised in this candidate pool, right? So a lot of companies will look within industry, within certain position titles. That's how traditionally it's been done. The companies that are successful right now in terms of finding talent elsewhere have looked more based on competencies and related experience. For example, we have a restoration client, and we've pulled from roofing, we've pulled from residential building. Some of our smaller GC clients, we've gone into different, whether it's mechanical or electrical subcontracting or other disciplines within construction. Because there's a talent shortage, companies that are focused more on competency, hiring for culture and fit, they're finding success in tapping into a candidate pool that maybe 5-10 years ago we weren't seeing companies do.
So maybe that candidate doesn't even have any practical in-the-field construction experience, but because they are a cultural fit, because they have the aptitude to do the job, they get some training on the job and become a real...
Exactly. There's some of their experience is relevant, some of it is less relevant. So companies that have a good understanding of their ramp-up time to get somebody up to speed, if they have a good team in place to help support that person as they get kind of brought up to speed on a new area of construction, they're finding great success.
So, what isn't working? I mean, companies that aren't successful in attracting, a talent pool, what are they doing? What are they doing wrong? I guess maybe they just aren't doing some of the things you just mentioned.
Yeah, a lot of companies that are kind of struggling right now, they've really failed to adapt the last, call it 5-10 years, and really COVID accelerated a lot of this.
Sure.
It's more about what do I have to offer as opposed to kind of what's in it for the candidate. So, companies that have a job description that reads 80-year-old company doing X in revenue. First thing, you have about 6 seconds when a candidate looks at a job description where they're making an assessment of, is this something for me or not? Mm-hmm. If it speaks to them, if it's going to say, have you thought about a long career in this industry that's going to provide you A, B, and C, right? Room to grow, development, high-end compensation, right? Things that speak to them as opposed to the company kind of highlighting some of their accomplishments.
Makes sense. Jason, anything to add to that? Or Adam, anything to add to that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Jason hit a lot of good points. I think the other thing to think about as well when looking at the pool is we've seen also a lot of hiring being done in silos, a department. So if, you're looking for a project manager, you're only bringing in maybe the operations leader. Important, one of the things when we work with a company is that we're talking to all the leaders in the organization because even if they're not directly working with this person, there's going to be some indirect communication of some sort. So making sure that all the leaders and hiring managers are on the same page, and that just helps run a very smooth process and for everybody to understand what success looks like and really what they're looking for.
That makes a lot of sense. We see it here. You get siloed out in your individual department, and you don't think about the interaction with the other departments or the other managers, and you culturally, that's what you need to do to have that fit. So that's a good differentiator. So for our members to think about making sure they're including the entire management team, making sure they understand their culture, so that when they're hiring, they're filling a couple of positions. Well, they're filling a couple of needs: the need for the employee, and then the need for the fit with everybody else. It'll make for a more successful candidate. So let's move on to attracting the right candidates. What should companies be thinking about when looking to attract candidates? And maybe Adam or Jason. Jason, why don't you take that one, and we'll swap over.
Yeah, it's funny. When we go into companies, a lot of times you'll look at an existing job description or a website, right? And it'll give you some good information on kind of company history, what they're doing, maybe some exciting projects that they're working on. When we go in and meet with leadership teams or talk with additional employees on in the company, we hear all these amazing stories. Whether it's something that a manager did, whether it's a new program that they kind of initiated for education, or ways they give back to the community, right? What we find is companies unfortunately aren't sharing this kind of message with the world when it comes to attracting new talent. So a lot of times it might be hard for companies to kind of toot their own horn or flush some of that really good content from their employees. So when we go in and get these stories, it's about sharing that message with the world, the unique things that make companies truly special. And it's just one of those things, unfortunately, sometimes employees either don't know how to, or companies either don't know how to do it because sometimes it's hard to look, when you're so close to it, you don't get it. And sometimes you just need an outside perspective to ask the questions.
So when you're working with a construction company, you kind of help them write that, I hate to use the term value proposition, but essentially that's what it is for the candidate. I mean, you're selling them on your company as much as they're there to be hired by your company, right?
Exactly. You're looking for kind of those personal little nuggets that when the right candidate reads that message, right, it's going to resonate with them. And that's where you're going to hit your cultural filter on those job descriptions when you ask them, like, what drove you to this opportunity? You're looking for that. You're looking at the reference, they're doing X in the community, or I heard this great story about what the company did for one of their employees that was on your job description, and that really spoke to me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I guess if I was going to ask you of an example of some companies that have put some cool stuff together that helps attract the talent, can you give me a couple of examples? I think you just did there for one. But
yeah, I mean, I think Ames Construction is a great. Is it okay to give?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're team members.
Yeah, so we've known them for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good relationship with leadership. We spend time at their job sites, getting to know their staff, and it's just whether it's one of their superintendents telling us that ownership kind of helped with some extra PTO, some extra money when his wife went out in surgery. Some of the work that they're doing in the community. It's little those stories when we vet for culture. We share that stuff with candidates, and that matters. That they know that if there's a family issue, that the company's going to be there for them. Well, you're not going to read that in a job description. You're not going to hear that necessarily in the interview.
Right.
But you're going to hear it from us because those are the kind of conversations we're having.
And Ames is also very intentional about succession planning as well. So they have a career path set for people, and they're looking for future leaders as they grow. And so that's a big reason why some candidates get stuck or frustrated, or employees at their current job, is they don't have that clarity of, being part of a succession plan, or they would be considered to be a future leader. And so those are some of the things that the right companies are doing. They're communicating that so people can see that they have those opportunities.
It's interesting because as I go to a lot of these programs today on attracting the right talent pool, a lot of it has to do with the attention span of the younger people today, because they get instant gratification by picking up their cell phone. They can answer anything within seconds. They want a clear advancement path, right? They don't want to be strung out. They want to know how they grow, kind of a thing, and they want that gratification throughout their career, their time period. So it's interesting to hear you say that the companies that are successful are implementing those kinds of things. Now, how do you do that? Like Ames is a larger company, but a small company, 20 employees that have certain jobs, and obviously there's a hierarchy to the top eventually. But how do you mold something like that for the smaller company?
It's a great question, and a lot of times you meet with leadership, and it's kind of candidate, but so you have an understanding of what's needed out of that position or that seat. When you get a candidate in for these small companies, what you can do is kind of get the hiring manager and the candidate in certain parts of the process to have the conversation of kind of let's map this role out, what it is today, and what it is 3 or 5 years from now. So you can kind of make that process collaborative before someone starts, where you're setting accountability matrices, you're helping to kind of create their bonus programs year over year. So you're doing a lot of that on the front end to kind of help build that role both for today and for the future.
So do you guys help clients with some of that thinking too? I mean, strategically?
Yeah, we've done a lot of that consulting work, some of that organizational design development. We'll meet with leadership teams, both small and larger companies, to truly figure out what's needed out of a seat for today, what's needed out of a seat for tomorrow, help identify those competencies. We build that into how we filter candidates, how we help them with the interview process, which we'll, I think, get into in a moment here. So we do a lot of that consultative work also.
That's excellent, because I think a lot of smaller companies specifically, but maybe all companies, need a little of that coaching and better understanding of how to get there. I mean, it's easy to talk about, it's easy to read in a book, but you actually need someone to help you work the strategy.
And it lends itself to a more transparent interview process. When this is all open face and you're having these kinds of conversations, your likelihood of getting someone to take a counteroffer is less, because they're a lot more invested in kind of creating their own role.
So, guys, let's turn to the interview process for a minute. In the current landscape where the demand for people is extremely high, what are the successful companies doing to be able to successfully hire?
Yeah, Kevin. Well, we kind of alluded to it earlier in the first part of the conversation, but as Jason had mentioned, know the candidate pool and make sure that we're contacting everybody that we could. And Jason talked about the example with restoration. You know, a lot of times companies are going in saying, I have to pull somebody from my industry or the competition. And what does that do? That limits the pool. That means you're basically only going after a certain subset, could be 25 to 50%. But if you open up the pool to maybe adjacent type of candidates that have some construction knowledge but are maybe just not getting the opportunity that they want, that becomes a sell that you can use to talk about this company and this opportunity in an industry. Restoration being one that, let's face it, is recession proof, where it's always going to be growing, right? So I would be looking at anybody in maybe a space that may not have that opportunity, where there is ups and downs, or, with the rising rates of inflation, things like that. So, know the pool and make sure that everybody is being contacted.
So how do you figure that pool out? Do you guys come in and meet with the client and then help determine the breadth or the width of the pool?
So depending on the role of the company and obviously what they're going to have this person do, certain roles have to come with an industry. If you need a superintendent to build a $100 million hotel, they probably need that experience.
Right.
Some of your smaller contractors, maybe they need an estimator. We've pulled folks in the roofing industry that have collaterally related experience, but maybe the estimator market, is your listener base might know, is very tight and competitive right now. There's not a lot of estimators in the GC world, so we try to expand that pool where we can. A lot of your back office, your administrative roles, those can come from related spaces. They don't necessarily need to come from commercial construction or construction at all.
Sure. One of the things I think of years ago when I was a younger guy, I would get these calls from what we called headhunters all the time, and they'd say, do you know anybody that does this kind of thing or that kind of thing, or are you interested in this? And, they virtually try to recruit you that way. Does that still go on today, or to some degree, I guess, for maybe some C-suite type things, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, especially if you're working in a new market, maybe a new niche, to use the relationships you have to try to generate referrals. And we've been working in Michigan construction for a decade plus, so that's usually the first place. We have a trusted network of folks, to kind of, hey, this is what we're working on right now. We're looking to, think a little bit outside the box. Do you have any thoughts? You might not be necessarily asking for like a direct candidate referral. You just might be trying to get relevant and just under a better understanding of the market.
Well, and the viability of the search, right? Are there going to be 30 people that are going to be a fit here for this company, or could it be 400? That's a different search, right? So,
sure, very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so Jason, Adam, why don't I ask you this one? But can you give me any examples of working with a client to perfect the interview process, or that makes, what do you guys do to make it a more successful interview process?
Great question. And communication is always key in everything, right? So having a very defined process in terms of timeline is a big thing. Right now, more is lost by a longer process. especially with a very tight competitive candidate market. If a company, I think the goal is here, is that an organization wants to create a great experience for people that are going through the interview process. And part of that is a timely fashion, timely feedback. What we've seen many times, and actually as a candidate before getting into recruiting, I was victim of this too when I was looking for a role in sales. It was I was working through recruiters, working through the company, had 5, 6, 7 interviews, and then never heard anything back. So it's making sure that companies are understanding the other side of it, and then they want to have timely feedback in order to hopefully, qualify and increase the likelihood that they're going to bring in people that they want in the organization. So the time investment is very important. The other piece is making sure if someone isn't a fit early, that they're disqualified early. That we've seen a lot of time being spent on people that really aren't a fit and would not be a good fit for this organization for whatever reason. So it's just as important to disqualify early as it is qualify. And going back to what we talked about earlier with getting all the leaders on the same page, we've seen the best success when more stakeholders are involved in the interview process. And that doesn't mean that, all 20 people have to talk to the person. Sometimes it's bringing multiple leaders together in one step of the interview. But again, you talk about buy-in and signing off on that culture and that good fit. It's important for the individual because they want to know what's in store for them in the culture and what the risks are. And if they're able to meet most of the stakeholders, if not all, that gives them a clear picture of this being a right fit for them or not.
So Adam,
same thing.
You mentioned the right fit. So how do you think people just know it's not going to be good fit, or do you oftentimes I think people are struggling with a couple of candidates and maybe one turns them down so they hire the second choice or what have you? I mean, how do you define whether or not it's a successful candidate, and then how do you cut bait if it's not?
Great question. It's a combination. What's pretty standard is, again, the responsibilities. Does this person have the ability or competencies or capabilities to do what you're asking them to do, a project to work on or whatever that may be the day-to-day? Core values. Companies really have to have a good understanding of their core values because they're going to hire, fire, reward, recognize to those core values. So in every step of the interview, those core values should be listed, and there should be questions asked to understand if this person is a fit or not. The other part of that is also what we call soft skills. And that's the piece of understanding what do you need out of this role, and Jason talked about it before. Is this entrepreneurial? Does this person need to have leadership? Are they a good team player? Whatever those are, it varies per role. But again, making sure that all of the leaders in the company are on the same page with what they're looking for.
So Jason, how do you vet those out? Because oftentimes it's important that you have somebody who can go out with a client and entertain, or bring his spouse along and entertain the client, or go to a baseball game or something and not get stoned out of his gourd. Or her gourd. You know what I mean? How do you?
I think it comes from spending time with your clients, getting to know them beyond just the first phone call. We see a lot of times in recruiting, someone may spend an hour with the leadership team. Maybe they don't go on site, maybe they do. But I think it's spending a couple hours on site, talking to 5 or 6 key stakeholders in the company. Also, just having worked in this market for 10 plus years, you talk to candidates, you hear a reputation of company A versus company B, and you just get a flavor for people. You get an understanding of what they're looking for in an opportunity, how they value something like project type versus short-term compensation versus long-term career pathing. Candidates will kind of tell you how they stack rank things, and you try to align those with the right clients.
So do you guys actually do some pre-vetting? Let's say I'm a contractor and I hire you guys to help me find the right talent. You guys probably vet it out and bring in 4 potential quality candidates. Is that
yes? So we're probably spending 5 to 10 hours on the front end before we even contact any candidates or really do any sourcing, getting to know these companies. Talking amongst ourselves,
understanding their core values, as you guys have stated.
And usually you're gonna, if someone needs a superintendent or a project manager and they're in this market in Detroit or somewhere else in Michigan where we've worked, after that conversation, we're going to know who our first 10 calls are going to be, because we know the folks who are potential fits and who might be a stretch and who's not a fit. And so we're going to hopefully save everybody some time and just focus on the ones that make sense. And like Adam said, the deals that don't, we'll kill those early.
Seems to me that it makes a lot of sense for a contractor or a construction company to to hire someone like you guys to be the front person on the front end, so that you do the background research, you kind of narrow down the scope, who you're looking for, as opposed to, their HR manager who may have to put an ad out somewhere and Indeed and get 25 resumes and have to read through them. It seems like it could save them a lot of time on the front end as well.
A lot of time. I mean, that it's the reach piece. We have a lot of relationships. We invest in some tools that are pretty costly, but give us a little more access to a wider candidate pool. And yeah, I think that running a tight process that Adam mentioned earlier saves hiring managers dozens of hours of time. We see companies and leadership teams, they'll spend 100 hours trying to find somebody and not get the result. So,
I know we want to get to the offer stage, but I want to ask you guys a question, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to ask anyways.
Sure.
I know there's got to be a fee for your services. So do you, I know some of the groups I've used in the past charge a percentage of salary or something like that. Is that kind of how you guys operate as well?
Yeah, we charge a percentage of salary, and then depending on the upfront work, we charge retainers on the front end depending on if we're doing some of the consultative stuff that we mentioned earlier, helping candidates write their job descriptions, helping them with some other tools to get started.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that could be very beneficial though for the right company, and to have someone that's taking that on, and as opposed to a lot of construction companies don't even have their own HR department, right? It's like the owner trying to run that, or the owner's wife, or the bookkeeper, or whoever, and it can get a little unwielding at times.
Well, it's about solving the problem, and that's not only finding the right person, that's retaining the right person. So that time spent on the front end with the extra vetting, that allows us to have that retention rate that you're looking for in terms of with people that you bring into the organization.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we do is, because we help companies expand their candidate pool, you can go into a market where average compensation might be $150,000 for a position, go into a related industry, get somebody for $120,000 in 2 years is going to be just as good. And hey, then our fee kind of pays for itself at that point.
Sure, absolutely. I'm gonna move to the offer stage. Let's say we're making an offer to a candidate. I want to know what successful companies are doing to increase the likelihood the candidate will say yes to the job, and then I'm going to ask Tim if he has Tim usually has a couple of good questions as well, so we'll go to Tim. But I guess why don't we start with you, Adam? Maybe you could answer that, and we'll go to Jason.
Absolutely.
So, with regards to the companies bringing the candidates, and what can they do to increase the likelihood of the acceptance?
Well, we kind of figured this stage, hopefully, if everybody's doing the right thing, should be more of a formality. It shouldn't really be a guessing game or praying at this point, because you've done ran a very smooth process. We vetted all the right people. Now we know this person fits our culture. They have the capabilities to do it. They're interested. This creates a better opportunity in their current company. So really just being proactive, and really there shouldn't be any surprises. So whether they're working with a firm like us or somebody's handling it internally, making sure that there's a clear understanding of why the person is choosing this organization versus the other. So the pros and cons have been outlined. There was a clear and convincing case.
So it almost becomes a formality, not
absolutely. And we have documents that we help our clients with, and individuals, where they're able to put that to paper, because it is powerful when you're going through this. Because if you think about a career change, it's probably one of the top 5 decisions you're going to make in your life. So we help them, and at the end of the day, there are cases sometimes where somebody looks at that chart and it's determined that their current company is the right fit for them, and they decide to stay. In other cases, it's the alternative.
Jason, anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. It's nailing the detail of every detail of the offer. So what we do is we kind of create a spreadsheet, current opportunity versus potential opportunity, and line up every single dollar that goes into that, into that deal. Both for today, sometimes it's just a 1-year kind of look, sometimes it's a 3-year look ahead. So to Adam's point, that there's full transparency in the process. A lot of times, something like a health insurance, a vehicle allowance, that stuff might get glazed over during the interview process. Right. If those details aren't nailed down, you can lose the deals at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just the salary, especially with today's people. It's how much time off do I get? What kind of PTO time? What kind of health insurance do I have? What's the coverage? What's my contribution level? Cell phone, car, whatever it might be. So to have something explicitly detailing that all out, it certainly seems to me that that's the right way to do it, as opposed to just talking about salary or an hourly rate or something.
And I think the other piece of that is the personalization, of the process. So you touch up things like work from home, or if you have a family situation, how that's discussed. Sending out an email offer without context, without that conversation. Companies that are doing it right, they might bring in a spouse or kind of have a dinner with everybody to get a feel for some of that culture.
Oh, Jason, we had one recently where a hiring team actually treated somebody to drinks and apps, just had a very informal, and they ended up signing them up and accepted the offer on the spot that way. So based on the culture.
Sure.
So versus getting them, versus in the office, maybe it's a little stuffier, a little more pressure there.
No, it's so different today. I think that's there's no doubt in my mind that's the right way to do it, but it's, today there's so many other factors that we have to take into account when we're hiring someone, and a lot of people aren't just concerned about the money anymore. They're more concerned about the culture and the time off and what we do for the community and what we do in the community and all of those things. So I think that's really sage advice. Tim, did you have any questions for the guys?
Yeah, I've got a question. So you guys have a lot of experience in the recruiting industry and in construction, and obviously you were around before COVID and after COVID, and I'm kind of wondering, I'm just curious, were there any things that you guys had to do to adapt when COVID, arrived? And are there any lingering effects where it's like, this is now the new standard based on, the craziness that arose from COVID? I'm just kind of wondering how that affected your business and how, that manifested in terms of what changed and how things are maybe done differently now as a result of that.
I think the biggest change during COVID has been the adaptation of Zoom just across the board and how we've utilized that. Previously, this was largely a phone business. So with us, both with clients and with candidates, you got to go from just talking to someone over the phone, to being able to look at them in the eyes, even though it's across camera, and also how you set up your interviews. A Zoom interview with the candidate's a lot more powerful than a phone screen. You're going to get a lot more from that. And it really replaced, we do some phone screens now and then, but a lot of these are Zoom first conversations. And some of how they appear on camera, their demeanor, and some is even like if they're at home, what's their background like? How organized is their office or home will tell you a lot about a person. I think some of the subtle things like that with the technology. I think the other thing that's changed was companies' willingness to do things a little bit differently, whether it's some of the remote stuff or just overall flexibility. And really, Kevin, you mentioned it. I think companies now are instead of following the old traditional ways of doing things, they're asking themselves, well, what makes sense? What does everyone want out of this? What's the result we're trying to get? So they're asking different questions than we saw maybe 5-10 years ago.
Sure.
Interesting.
That was a good question, Tim. Anything else?
Yeah. I guess kind of just building on that, you mentioned that something now that really helps attract, a good employee is having an interview process that's kind of streamlined and, maybe more simplified than it was in the past. And, I guess I'm just thinking maybe that's like a result of kind of like you said, the Zoom technology, all the different modes of communication now. It kind of makes it easier to make those decisions quicker, perhaps. Not really even a question. I'm kind of just thinking out loud.
Yeah, it's a good point for sure. If you think about it, Jason just mentioned, right? Before there's traditionally, and even for hiring managers, right? You have a first interview. It's going to be an in-person. Right? Well, it's an in-person, right? You're driving 2 hours round trip to do that. You don't even know if there's a fit or not there. So right then and there's 2 to 3 to 4 hours burned. Whereas before, first of all, our firm would be doing the pre-vetting, for working with a company, but that right then and there, it's almost like 2 interviews in one if you can get a Zoom, essentially, because you're, as Jason said, you're looking at somebody, you're able to see their demeanor, eye contact, things like that, and for the individual to determine if it's a good fit for the company. So again, to the point of streamlining it, it's about, again, qualifying or disqualifying very quickly.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, guys, before we close this down, if any of our members want to get a hold of you, how can they connect with CTC? I know you're CAM members, so you're obviously in the buyer's guide on the website. I think you've actually been quoted in a few of our magazine articles, and we hope to have more from you. But you're out at our events. But, Adam, why don't you tell us how we can get a hold of you guys?
Sure. Adam Cosola, Jason Epstein, we're both on LinkedIn. CTCSolutions.net is our website. Phone number 248-410-6808. And then obviously our email's info@ctcsolutions.net.
Great, and if anybody needs that, they can certainly call the office, and we can pass them on to you. I'd like to give the guests one last chance to say any final thoughts or give any final thoughts or words of wisdom to our audience out there in construction land. So why don't we, Adam, start with you. Do you have any final thoughts before we close this up today?
Absolutely. For companies that are thinking about hiring or have current needs, just looking at their current method for attracting people and just asking themselves, is this the solution? Is this going to help me stand out and attract the right people versus my competition?
Perfect. All right, Jason, any final words of wisdom?
Cut from the same cloth. Talk to your people. Talk to your employees. Get those stories from them. Share those with the market. That's what people want to hear.
Well, Adam, Jason, on behalf of all of us at CAM, myself, our producer, Tim Andrews, thank you for being with us today on CAM's Building Michigan podcast.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Building Michigan, the official podcast of the Construction Association of Michigan, hosted by Kevin Koehler, CAM President. We appreciate you spending a part of your day with us. If you have a second, please share our podcast with industry colleagues, leave us a review, and connect with us at www.buildwithcam.com. That's all for now. Be sure to subscribe to Building Michigan wherever you get your podcasts and join us for the next episode.
Today's episode of CAM's Building Michigan podcast is sponsored by Priority Health, endorsed health insurance carrier for CAM members.
So right now, we've all been feeling lots of shifts in our lives. We've gone from crazy busy schedules to way more time with our loved ones, from commuting to the office to working from our couches. And that's okay, because Priority Health is always ready to shift right there with you. So whether you're experiencing a shift in employment or you're prepping for a new member of the family to arrive, Priority Health has you covered. Priorities shift, so maybe it's time your health insurance company did too. Find your plan at PriorityHealth.com.
It's that time of year. Time to review your workers' compensation plan and shift to coverage that pays you back. CAMCOM, part of the Construction Association of Michigan, is the state's leading self-insured group designed for the construction industry. The safer your employees, the more money you get back. The average payback to members is 45% of their premium, a very smart investment.
Find out how safety pays. For more information, please contact Michelle Mage at mmage@camcomp.net.
The Construction Association of Michigan, CAM, has been helping commercial and industrial contractors and suppliers grow since 1885. They provide contractors leadership through aggressive lobbying, construction project reporting, safety and education training, industry promotion, insurance, and banking. Are you an owner, developer, or buyer of construction services? Hire a CAM member to get your project done on time and under budget. They are one industry, one resource, one CAM. Check them out at buildwithcam.com.